much more that you can't see. The stream that enters is water from the Sacramento, brought down more than 100 miles to replace the flow of the San Joaquin, which formerly fed this man-made pool. The once uncontrolled San Joaquin is now regulated by Friant Dam, blocking the old river channel, which feeds a canal, running down along the eastern edge of the valley to augment other sources of agricultural water. The project serves an ever-increasing number of areas north and south in a great integrated system which supplements existing or takes care of the water needs of thousands of farmers who have no other reliable and economical source for their widely diversified crops raised throughout the basin. Thus, the Central Valley Project contributes importantly to these people's share of the $1 billion worth of agricultural produce grown and shipped from the valley every year. This in turn contributes to the economy of the valley area, the state, and the nation. Carloads of food like fresh oranges, walnuts, carrots, potatoes, cantaloupes, or catsup, olives, canned peaches, seedless raisins are available everywhere from San Francisco to New York to Kokomo or East St. Louis. Because of the work of the people who have engineered, built, and are operating the Central Valley Project. To grasp what these water specialists have accomplished, we need to comprehend the water problems that confront them. Looking eastward over California from the Pacific Ocean, the coast ranges lift 4,000 or 5,000 feet to form a barrier against the sea. Beyond are the southern Cascades merging into the Sierra, up to 14,000 feet high. Between these mountain walls lies the great Central Valley Basin, about 500 miles long and up to 60 miles wide. It is as big as Denmark. In this basin are the valleys of two rivers. In the north, the Sacramento. In the south, the San Joaquin. The rivers run to the lowest point, where they escape to the sea through the coastal wall, to San Francisco Bay and the Golden Gate. The sea level area just east of the escape notch is the delta. In the north, the valley rainfall and the snowfall in the mountains is heavier. Precipitation decreases toward the south. It is lowest in the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley. On the east side of the valley, many rivers come down from the snow heights. Toward the south, the rivers are smaller, fed by lighter rain snowfall. On the west side wall of the San Joaquin, where precipitation is light, there are but few streams, and they flow only in the wettest seasons. The wet season usually meant flood time, and the rivers often were torrents of destruction, washing billions of tons of water through the mouth of the delta to waste in the sea. While during the summer dry season later, the river shrank, becoming mere trickles in the San Joaquin Valley. At these times, surface water was scarce. The only water to be had came from wells that reached down to where some of the runoff had percolated to form an underground reservoir. In general, the northern portion of the basin had a water surplus, and the southern portion had a deficiency. About the middle of the last century, after the excitement of the gold rush subsided, dry farming was begun in the valley, with wheat the predominant crop. In the San Joaquin, cattle were raised on the plains of the valley floor. But as early as the 1850s, attempts were made to get away from dry farming. The settlers tried diverting streams and digging canals to bring irrigation water to diversified crops. Some of the canals excavated in the late 19th century are still in use. At the same time, pumping of underground water was begun. However, continued pumping without replenishment of the underground reservoir is known as mining water. Success for a heroically conceived system that would help solve the water problems of the many farmers. The state of California had been developing such a plan, but by the early 1930s, it was found more practical to turn the problem over to the federal government. The agency with sufficient resources and a wide background of experience was the Bureau of Reclamation. One of the initial phases of the Central Valley Project involved damming the San Joaquin River to catch and control floodwaters as well as normal runoff for storage, to divert irrigation water north and south through the low rainfall area of the southern end of the valley. The normal flow of the San Joaquin River would have to be replaced at Mendota Pool, where water was already being taken to serve an area long under cultivation. Replacement water would have to be brought from the Delta. And to ensure a constant regulated supply, the Sacramento River would have to be controlled to prevent floods and also to maintain sufficient flow in the dry seasons, when salt water encroaching from the bay beyond would spoil the fresh river supply. The engineers selected a site on the Sacramento below where the tributary McCloud and Pitt rivers joined it to build Shasta Dam, creating Shasta Lake. Below the white tower of Mount Shasta, the prominent peak of the southern Cascade Range. Shasta Dam is one of the most immense structures ever reared by man. 602 feet above bedrock, the curving crest 2/3 of a mile long is higher than the Washington Monument. When measuring water capacity, an amount of water which covers an acre 1 foot deep, called an acre foot, is the unit of measurement. Shasta Lake can contain 4,500,000 acre feet, over 7,000 gallons for each man, woman, and child in the USA. Here, corralled in a calm lake up to 515 feet deep, are waters that began as plunging streams down the upper slopes of the mountains. Stored here, they represent floods that never happened, millions of acre feet that would otherwise have wasted into the sea. Here are waters that will be released to irrigate crops, to percolate into farm soil, nourishing growing roots, sinking down to replenish water tables underground in the valley below, to flow and domesticate the rich but dry San Joaquin Basin. This is where a large part of the power is produced. 85 tons of water a second from each of the huge penstocks sloping down from the dam can spin the turbines of 5 generators with the force of 500,000 horsepower. When all 5 are in operation, the generators will develop 375,000 kilowatts of electricity, or enough to supply a city of 500,000 people. On this powerful generating capacity rests a respectable share of the burden of repaying the construction costs for the entire project. After being generated, power goes to the transmission lines for delivery to the pumping plant of the Delta, as well as to the Northern and Central California customers. There are some benefits from project features like Shasta Dam, whose value can hardly be expressed in dollars and cents. These are dividends in recreation, outdoor fun and relaxation, for people who are nearly all drawn to open water, as if it exerted some irresistible spell. So the impounded waters serve swimmers, boaters, campers, vacationers, and Sunday excursionists, as well as the essential purposes waiting to haul them 30 miles downstream to Coleman Fish Hatchery for spawning. Several rivers and streams join the Sacramento on its southward course, and one of the most important of these tributaries is the American River, which comes in at the city of Sacramento. Fed by mountain streams from the high Sierra, the American, tractable as it appears now, was always a flood menace. Old homes built high off the ground in Sacramento lowlands, only a few feet above sea level, and an elaborate levee system attest to the regularity of flood conditions that always existed. The American River was tied in with the Central Valley Project through flood control, and Folsom Dam, 20 miles upstream from the capital, was authorized for construction by the Army Corps of Engineers as a flood control measure. It was designed as a multiple purpose. The reservoir water level is carefully regulated through controlled releases to the river, especially during the flood season, to provide storage for heavy runoff. But in any season, the lake and recreation area acts as a lure for water sports enthusiasts from Sacramento and beyond. More serious head into the Central Valley Project electrical system through the 20-mile-long Folsom Alberta transmission line to the Alberta switchyard, where it augments the power generated in the Shasta area. The re-regulating unit power plant. Here on the American River, as on the Sacramento, the salmon and steelhead come on their way to ancestral spawning grounds. The migrants, guided by a rack that blocks the river, ascend the fish ladder, which leads to a holding pond. from which they are taken and the eggs removed for the spawning operation. The eggs, tens of millions of them each season, are placed in troughs in the hatchery. Minute salmon, after the eggs have hatched, appear to be jet-propelled. The young fish grow rapidly at the hatchery. Then, as fingerlings, they are released back into the river for their journey to the ocean. This is the multiple-use concept of water resource development, which includes preserving salmon and steelhead resources for the future, as well as aids in control of the Sacramento as it moves down toward the Delta area. The Delta is a lowland plain jigsawed into a maze of islands by a great complex of rivers and channels, a large part of which are contained by levees. One of the initial problems of the Central Valley Project was to ensure a constant supply of high-quality water here at the point where it was to be taken for pumping into the canal that would transfer it south. After careful studies, it was decided to create a channel near Walnut Grove to divert Sacramento River water to the pumping plant. This bypass is the Delta Cross Channel. Waters entering the channel include controlled releases from Shasta Lake and from Folsom Reservoir. In the Sacramento headquarters of the Central Valley Project, critical control is maintained over all waters of the system. Water that enters the cross channel under direction from this central point moves down the channels 50 miles to the Tracy pumping plant, which lifts it to the head of the Delta-Mendota Canal. At the intake channel, the fish find the project facilities to be a problem again. For while it is another case of the big ones getting away, the small fry would be drawn downstream and into the pumps. The problem was solved by project engineers and fishery biologists who designed an ingenious device for collecting small fish from the channel. Based on the apparent ability of fish to sense an obstruction as they drift downstream with the current, a screen of closely spaced vertical louvers directs them away from the main flow and into underwater conduits which deliver them to holding tanks. In specially refrigerated and aerated trucks, the fingerlings are hauled downstream and released a safe distance from the intake. The Tracy pumping plant, which is thus isolated from the fish population of the Delta, is called the heartbeat of the Central Valley Project. Here, 6 powerful pumps, which working together could fill a 100,000-gallon tank in 3 seconds, lift the water a mile uphill to the head of the canal, 200 feet higher than the inlet channel. Power to spin the 6 22,500 horsepower motors that raise the waters destined to replace San Joaquin River flow far to the south comes in at the nearby Tracy switchyard, load center of the Central Valley Power Transmission System. Surplus power is sold to public agencies, largely federal establishments, irrigation districts, and municipalities, in accordance with reclamation law. But the first job for the energy created by faraway falling waters is to hoist the same waters after their journey down the rivers up to the head of the Delta-Mendota Canal. This is an impressive man-made stream 117 miles long and designed to slope southward 3 inches to the mile. There is an irrigation turnout on an average of every half mile to serve the arid farmlands on the west side of the valley. But the bulk of the water continues on southward, and as it nears Mendota, it parallels one of the old irrigation canals heading north from the pool. Each is so carefully engineered on its slope that the water in the 2 gravity canals can run in opposite directions. At Mendota Pool, water that was stored in Shasta Lake, mingled with water from Folsom Reservoir and other North Valley runoff, comes in to replace the flow of the San Joaquin and feed irrigation canals, many of which have been in use since before the turn of the century. From the pool, water is also taken for the benefit of millions of air travelers, the wild ducks and geese that come to the nearby 15-square-mile Mendota Wildfowl Management Area, maintained by the state on the Pacific Flyway, the traditional route taken by migrating game birds. The water rights of riverside farmers along the San Joaquin below Friant Dam are satisfied by releases from Millerton Lake, the reservoir created by Friant Dam, which not only stores water to irrigate 1 million acres in the southern sector of the valley, but provides much needed flood control. Here again, the creation of a body of water where none existed before has also created a water playground for boaters, fishermen, swimmers, and for the people who just bring a picnic lunch to enjoy in the open air. But the engineers and planners of the Central Valley Project created the lake in the dry foothills primarily to feed a new river that snakes down the east side of the southern valley through productive but thirsty farmland. The soil was fertile, but water was scarce. The streams were thin in the heat of summer, and in years of lean rainfall, the rivers dried into the sand. The underground reservoir was overdrawn, and wells were deep and expensive. For some, the hopes and dreams that were searching roots in the crusted soil withered, and with the stream beds, turned to dust. The Friant Kern, the new river, brought relief to the thousands of farms in the major water deficiency area of the project. The releases from its turnouts along most of its length, 152 miles from the dam south to the Kern River near Bakersfield, nourishes the roots of crops that form a vast resource of food and fiber. Produce, much of it, that after the harvest flows out of the valley and across the country, a return flow of dollars to the bank accounts and cash registers of the San Joaquin. Irrigation water in all project service areas, north and south, is contracted for by agencies called irrigation districts, which are formed by groups of farmers who join together to obtain and distribute water to their farms. After a request for water service from an irrigation district has been approved, a contract is prepared, which is voted upon by the members of the district before being signed. The volume of orders for water is reflected in the daily releases to the canal, which has a capacity of more than 4,000 cubic feet per second. And deliveries are made on schedule from the concrete-lined river that has kept thousands of once dry South Valley acres green. Another smaller man-made river flows north from Friant Dam. This is the Madera Canal, running 36 miles and supplying water for nearly 200,000 growing acres. The Friant Kern and Madera canals are largely concerned with furnishing irrigation water. But there is another water artery, the Contra Costa Canal, actually the first project canal to go into operation, running from the Delta 48 miles west to Martinez, which not only transports water for irrigated farmland, but domestic supplies for municipalities, and water for the industry that is developing and expanding on the south side of Suisun Bay. 4 pumping plants lift the water uphill from sea level, a total of 124 feet, to a point where it can flow by gravity the remainder of its length through the growing populated area it serves. Municipal, industrial, and domestic water for the city of Placerville, and supplemental or full supplies of irrigation water for 10,000 crop acres comes through the Sly Park unit of the Central Valley Project, the main feature of which is Sluck Dam, which has created Jenkinson Lake. Water is now on its way to the north-central Sacramento River Valley through the Sacramento Canals unit of the Central Valley Project. Sacramento River water diverted below the town of Red Bluff is pumped to the head of the Corning Canal, the first stage of the system to be completed. Eventually, the Sacramento canals will furnish irrigation water for over 200,000 acres in an area where farmers mainly have been raising dry farmed crops. To assure the future flow in the Sacramento canals and in canals that today are no more than ideas in the minds of men, the engineers of the Central Valley Project plan and build to put more water resources to work. 20 miles west and 1,500 feet above the Sacramento at Keswick Dam, in the region of 80% water surplus, runs the Trinity River, wasting 1 million acre-feet a year. A series of dams, reservoirs, and tunnels will store and divert most of the surplus. The greatest westward migration in the history of the world is converging on California at the rate of more than 1,000 people a day. By 1975, the population of Central Valley alone will probably exceed 3 million. The ability of the Great Basin to absorb this growth will depend upon provisions for adequate water to meet all human needs. Over the mountains and the vast Midland Plain of California, the weather cycles roll on, through wet seasons and dry seasons as before. But through the work of the people of the Central Valley Project, more and more of the water once lost in the sea is brought under control, directed in regulated flow down the rivers and canals, keying in with local water programs to work for the citizens of the Great Basin and of the state and the nation. For the wealth production capacity of Central Valley Project is its greatest asset. The availability of water for irrigation, municipal and industrial use, and for power generation, protected from floods, makes this rich basin one of the nation's foremost agricultural and industrial sections. The increased value of farm and orchard products and the associated general increase in the economy of the area is a gratifying result of project operation in controlling and equitably distributing nature's resources of water for the great Central Valley.